Well, hey everyone. I am Nate Conroy with Rain. I want to welcome those who are joining us live for this lunch hour session 2 of the series Personal Finance for Entrepreneurs. If you're joining us after the fact, watching this recording, welcome as well. We're glad that you're here. This series, as I mentioned in session 1, if you haven't found session 1, by the way, that's up on our YouTube channel. It's up on our Facebook page. So go ahead and watch that one first. I thought it was a really great discussion, especially about kind of the mindset and the baggage that we all bring when it comes to these discussions around personal finance. As sort of a reminder, I mentioned this last time. Part of my job with Rain is to be what they call a venture catalyst here in Lynn and Benton counties in Oregon. And a huge part of that job is just listening to local entrepreneurs and hearing about what questions they have about making the leap into entrepreneurship. And one question that came up again and again was, how do I make smart decisions with my personal financial life as I'm getting ready to go into entrepreneurship, or even like as I'm an entrepreneur? What should I be thinking about in terms of how to manage my personal finances? And so it was really awesome to reach out to Brett Heaton Juarez, who is the author of the book Change from Your Dollars. I really appreciate Brett, and without too much ado, we'll launch into session 2. Last reminder I'll make is that Brett has been nice enough to share with us all of the worksheets and materials. I put that onto a Google Drive that I'm sharing with everybody, again, as well as the recordings. And we are giving away each week copies of Brett's book to those who tune in. So thanks for joining us in person if you can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Brett, who'll lead us here in session 2. Thanks, Brett.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Session 2. The plan for today is to give an overview of personal finance in 1 hour. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be busy, you're going to be pressed for time. And as a reminder to everyone, this is part of a 4-part resource that Rain has set up. Part 1 was mindset. Part 2, today, talking about the menu, all the options on the market, things you're likely to see. Part 3, next week, we'll talk more about putting that into action steps in a sequence as you transition or become more and more immersed in entrepreneurship. And then part 4 is I'm offering a one-on-one consultation for you to ask individual questions that you might have, because you probably will have some. So looking back to last week, talked a lot about mindset. We're not going to go backwards. All I will say is that your mindset is a key variable in your own financial planning. You might ask a question about investing, but the biggest variable in your outcomes is how you think and your past experiences. Because business is personal, there's no avoiding it. When I think of examples of people who have really hit a wall on their entrepreneurial path, these are 2 hard stops. My spouse said no, or I applied for credit and they said no. And now I'm stuck. So one of those is financial. We can plan for that. The other is very relational, but it's relevant. To the extent you can, we want to plan. And so we want to avoid being reactive. A plan can always change, but you need a plan. And lastly, business is personal. In business and in your personal life, boundaries are healthy. I've seen some people, they don't talk to anyone about their business or their finances at all for their entire lives. It becomes hard to change that the older they get. I've had people come home and be like, oh my God, I lost this huge sale. I'm going to owe, $3,000. and they're telling that to their spouse, and their spouse is kind of like, okay, that's not always helpful either. Now, as we go through these 4 pathways do show up in the financial planning menu, meaning that different types of accounts and products, you can see these patterns inside of them. And so you can refer back to that as we go through this. The key point is that there is more than one way to do this. You don't have to be an enormous risk taker to be a successful entrepreneur. You don't have to be consistent. There's more than one way. And the last thing from last week is perception is reality. When you start your own business, you form an LLC, whatever the case may be, maybe you're already there, you will get unsolicited offers for all sorts of things. Amex will send you a business credit card offer in the mail multiple times, right? You'll get all sorts of pitches, solicitations, things like that. It's going to be important to articulate who you are and what you want. As an example, I got an inbound request. The person wanted to invest $5,000. She was self-employed. She seemed very tentative. She seemed new to the realm of investing. And she was hesitant to share a lot. So I proceeded to kind of give her my context of like, well, all right, you're new to investing. Here's what we might talk about. As we approached the hour, 50 minutes into a 1-hour meeting, she casually mentioned that she had $200,000 in the bank. If she didn't tell me that, that would have changed. It would have materially changed the advice that she got. So just keep that in mind. All right. The personal finance menu. The goal with personal finance is to be conversational, not fluent. My wife's family is from El Salvador. Her parents grew up there. We go visit every couple of years. I am conversational in Spanish. I'm not fluent. When I try and muddle through things, it's funny a lot of the times, but it does a couple things when I try to speak another language. I learn because people are giving me feedback. Oh, no, you don't say it that way. You say it this way. Number 2, there's some level of rapport that helps because I look like an idiot. I'm being vulnerable. And they're like, oh, this guy, he doesn't speak Spanish. He looks like an idiot. Like, let me help him. Right. And over time, I learn and I become more open to help. That is what engaging with personal finance is like. If I went there and said, like, I'm American, I don't speak Spanish, I'm going to be closed off to advice, to help, to guidance. Very similar here. I think the difference, a key differentiator is planning is a process and sales are transactional. And so not everything is in depth. You can think of one as a partner on your board in your business venture. That's planning. And then there's a store. So questions I get, do you do taxes? Where should I invest? And can you send me term life insurance quotes? All of these are people shopping at a financial store. I have to decide if I have that in stock or not, based on it, just kind of like, well, okay. How much time is that going to take? Is that the ROI for me as a planner and someone who is a planner is generally building a relationship over time. So the objective today is to have enough context to really ask quality questions of financial professionals. Your mindset is important because anyone who is selling you anything works for you. And when we show up thinking, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about, or then that changes the dynamic. So I will say that this is an overview. I wrote a book, as Nate mentioned. I am a practicing certified financial planner. So a lot of what I'm bringing to this presentation is an overview of lots and lots and lots of conversations, thousands of conversations, and what people actually say out loud and what they ask and what they tend to think. Okay. So two key concepts with finances and shopping on the menu. One is that just as your value proposition as an entrepreneur should exceed the price that you charge, right? If I'm going to buy anything, I have to believe it's worth at least that amount of money, if not more, right? Now, this example of an upscale restaurant. Now, what am I getting? Now, a food truck or a hole in the wall place, typically almost all of their resources in terms of pricing is going into the quality of the food. Other restaurants will have a beautiful venue. It'll be upscale. Maybe it'll be in a really like popular corner street. And a lot of that is going to real estate and the experience. So in order to get the most out of it, you really have to say, what am I going to use this for? The second thing is direct cost versus opportunity cost. We tend to focus on what is this cost? What is the fee? There's also an opportunity cost of doing something or not, which is the lost opportunity of indecision. Here's an example. If someone wants to start a new investment account, let's say for every $100 earned, it's maybe $2 of fees. You could do it online for $0 in fees. So the direct cost is $2 for every $100 invested. I'm not really hustling for that $2. It's not worth it to me or most people. That's why the online space is so effective. However, are you getting service? Because if me or someone like me hassles you to invest sooner versus you look up something online and then you wait a year, well, then that couple $100 invested will amount to maybe $500 more 10 years from now when you're retired. So that's the opportunity cost, is the catalyst for action. Now, Rain has all sorts of resources on like pricing and all that, but I include this here, the kind of quality, is like, these are the things that go into supply and demand. So I think in the menu today, a good benchmark for you is, can you explain to a friend why you did something financially? You're never going to know everything, but can you explain the rationale? If you can, that's probably good enough. If you can't, it'd be worthwhile to go back to whoever you're working with and be like, can you explain this to me again? Okay. So we are going to draw something live. And my
Are you wanting to use like the whiteboard functionality, Brett?
I might have to because I was going to do, yeah, let's do that. The connection broke on plan A. So let's do that.
Do you see on the bottom of the screen, there's I see it, it's the second from the far right. It's something that says whiteboards. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And Brett, just to kind of clarify, so what you were just talking about, it's like as we're thinking of you're about to tell us different sort of options related to personal finance, and as we're thinking about all those different options, we should be thinking about like what you were just saying in terms of there's going to be different options that have costs involved, but there's going to be opportunity cost. We should also be thinking about the complexity of them. That's your point about being able to explain what we're doing to friends. Okay, yeah, just getting kind of a sense of where we're
Mhm.
headed. It's good. We're seeing your screen with the Venn diagram
Okay,
going on.
cool. I'm wondering if I can. I can. All right. So we have three categories of tools. The first is cash. Oops. Maybe I will use the cash and credit. Okay. Just imagine that says cash and credit. Okay. Keep it in your head. Now, the thing about cash and credit is it is absolutely essential to the lifeblood of your household and I mean, that's a hard stop. If you don't have money to spend, that's it. So the idea with cash and credit is that you're always saving something if you can. This is your bank account, your savings. Things inevitably happen. You need a car repair, you grow it again, you take a vacation, spend more than usual that much. You grow it again, something happens. And the goal with the savings account is that you never want it to be too low. It's important for you to know what your number is. Is it zero? Is it 10,000? That's a number that it's very important to talk about with other people in your life because you might disagree. On the other hand, you don't want it to be too high either, because if you go way up here beyond what constitutes an emergency fund, there's an opportunity to go into the second sphere, which I'm drawing with my mouse here, invest. What all investments have in common is optimism. There's a starting point and an ending point. Now, this could be 5 years, it could be 50 years. What it is very important in the conversation because there's a relationship between how much risk you're willing to take and the average performance over time. The higher the average performance, the more ups and downs there will be. That is an inescapable relationship. If you're going to buy crypto or short GameStop, it might be even, more, right? Now, what people generally come to the table with is, how is my investment doing? Or like, where is a good place to invest? Short term, totally luck. If you're really going to try to like, I mean, that's like hedge fund territory, like research, macro level stuff. So investing, think of 5 years or more. Okay. What I'm interested in is, what is this money for? Because if you say, well, how's it doing? Well, that depends. Are we talking about here or here? Makes a big difference. So generally, the shorter the timeline for withdrawal, the more cautiously you want to invest. Because if we go back over to cash and credit, something that entrepreneurs do, maybe you're open to it, maybe you're not, as you take money out of your investments or your retirement account. Cash is negative, so it's got to come from somewhere. But if it comes from investments at the wrong time, it's not ideal, because you didn't take the money out of your investment at the planned ending point. Okay. The third category is insurance. Insurance is for risk transfer, something that doesn't happen very much, but if it did, it would be very severe. You cover things with insurance, you transfer the risk to an insurance company if you don't plan on keeping enough money in the bank to cover it yourself. So if my house burns down, I'm not going to keep that in the bank just in case. So I give that to insurance. So insurance is a shared pool. We contribute money, picks us back up. Contribute fender bender, okay? Disability, right? Picks us back up. And if we don't have the right type of insurance, we have to claw our way back out and weather the storm, usually by taking on considerable debt or by selling our investments at the wrong time. So this is an ecosystem. How these different things interact with each other, that's financial planning. The menu, there's all sorts of things that we're going to get to now. Those are transactions. So it's important to differentiate those two things. So I will pause there, and I apologize that it's sloppy. I was planning on doing it with an actual pen, but that broke. All right, let me go back. That's neater. That's the short version. Okay, part one, investing.
And Brett, I took us off of Spotlight just in case folks had questions, but I'll put back on that Spotlight so we just see Brett kind of for recording purposes. But just to pause, any questions thus far? Okay.
All right,
Cool.
oh,
Keep it going.
Okay, this comes up a lot too. The left column is account types as labeled. All these things refer to a set of rules in the tax code. There are specific limits, deductions, withdrawal rules. Like, these are common ones, okay, especially for entrepreneurs. The right side is what goes into the bucket, so to speak. So you can mix and match these two things. Someone could put bank CDs, certificates of deposits, in their retirement account. Or you could put stocks and mix and match. So the point of emphasis here is that these are two distinct filters. Yeah. So in this graph, this is the stock market. And it gives each person an idea, all of us, because the stock market is publicly traded investments. So my experience with it is going to be similar to yours if we have the same stuff, same investments. About 3/4 of the time, it goes up. Not all the time, but about 3/4 of the time. 87% over every 5-year period. Now that could be 2003 to 2008, 1931 to 1936, any 5-year period, it's positive 87% of the time. 15-year period, it has always gone up. It's not a guarantee, but remember, investing is about optimism. That's why we say, I'm investing in my neighborhood. I'm investing in myself. I'm investing in my children, my community. Right? There are 3 elements that affect a person's investment return, 3 levels of risk. One would be taxes. Because depending on how an investment is taxed, that will affect what you actually get to keep. So you could say, oh, my investment did 10%, but if you're paying taxes on the growth, whereas maybe somewhere else you're not, your actual return might be 7 or 8%. It's common for business owners at the end of the year to take a look at what they owe on taxes and then say, okay, I'm trying to reduce that bill. Where can I get a deduction? And then maybe they contribute to like a SEP IRA, and then they put money in, lower their tax bill. The second level of risk or type of risk is the market. And that goes back to the whiteboard squigglies that I just made. Nobody can tell you how to invest. Like, planning for the future and starting somewhere is hard enough. You can be a cautious investor. So there's so much lost time. The expression is time in the market is more powerful than timing the market. So don't ask, is it the right time to invest? It'd be like, well, what can I, how much, and start somewhere meaningful and doable. And then the third type of risk is withdrawal or access. So for example, if someone puts $10,000 in their IRA and over 5 years, it grows to 13,000, which is reasonable. So that's cumulative 30% growth, or an average of maybe 6% a year. So that's like a pretty reasonable thing. What if that person needs to take the money out? Well, if it's an IRA, they'll pay 10% penalty, which is $1,300, plus let's say 22% income tax, which is $2,574, and that leaves them with a net of 9,126, or a negative rate of return. So as a practitioner, it's not just, oh, I want to throw it in there and let it go, but how is it going to be used, and how sure am I that I can finish what I started? Okay, up next, cash and credit. So there's a role for debt to play. When you have faith, when you believe in your vision, debt is leverage, right? A lender has money, you don't have enough. They're going to let you borrow it so that you can keep your life moving in the direction that you want. Going to college, buying a house are 2 very common examples. Now, the value of those things are, did you like the house, or did you move again in 6 months? And with college, it depends a lot on the profession and the ROI and the career. I've separated these. Another way to put it is good debt and bad debt, which I don't really like those labels, but that roughly correlates to what's on screen. you can get a tax deduction, which is going to become very important when you're self-employed. And we're talking more about taxes next week. But a business line of credit, home equity line of credit, those can be deductible. Student loans, mortgages, sometimes depends on how your taxes are done. And an investment line of credit is basically where you say, all right, I want to borrow money, but if I can't pay you back, you can take my investments. That sort of thing can be really attractive for someone who has built a solid financial foundation and is now considering taking some risk. And, you know, on the right side, I mean, payday loans are a pretty extreme example, but all of these things don't offer any tax benefits. And typically, unsecured personal loans will be simple interest. But if we go on to some other kind of key points in cash and credit, at the bottom of those key terms is collateral. So the reason that a car loan tends to pay, you borrow $20,000 for a car, they'll usually pay less interest, almost always, unless you're getting ripped off, than an unsecured personal loan. It's like, hey, I'd like to borrow $20,000 for something. And the reason is because the lender can take back your car. So that's collateral. So if you have collateral, that can get you to borrow at lower interest rates. The other key point is variable versus fixed. Fixed interest rates are really high right now. The Federal Reserve and interest rates, that's in the news. In the entrepreneurial journey, as you're looking for access to credit or even just buying stuff, there's a cycle. It's like the economy starts to slow down. They're like, hey, let's get people moving. Let's get people, go buy a new house, go buy a new car, go buy some stuff. And so they loosen credit. And then what happens is with inflation, now they're starting to keep it, they're tightening it up again. Oh, no, slow down. Let's cool this off, right? A key point that I wanted to make on money in the bank is that if you're in the fortunate position to have significant savings, and I guess significant is certainly a relative term, but I would think of it as like maybe $10,000 or more that you don't really need for your monthly bills, at least not right now. If you earn interest on a CD or a high yield savings, you pay taxes on the interest every year, whether you use the money or not. So if someone has, to use a round number, if someone has a $10,000 CD, 5-year CD, and it pays 5% a year, that's $500 of interest, but probably about 100 goes to taxes every year. Investing, the taxes are lower. And the only reason that I kind of share that different is like, that's something I've seen lately is people are like, oh, I didn't know I was like paying that in taxes. I guess I should do something else. But the tax code wants us to buy homes, to start businesses, to save for retirement, to plan for our kids, like there's always an incentive there. Now I'm going to go back to the whiteboard here because this is another way you can think of a filter of like, should I borrow or not? We're talking about simple debt versus, or rather simple interest versus compound interest. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the whiteboard. Oh, there it is. New whiteboard. Okay. So let's say that a person is earning money and spending money. They haven't borrowed anything, but they also haven't invested anything either. And they decide to, let's say, get a Roth IRA, which, by the way, is the starting point for 9 out of 10 people who are new to retirement, self-employed. Like, Roth IRAs are great. Not even Google has anything bad to say about Roth IRAs. So if you start to put money in, it will take a while for that to build some momentum. And the reason is because, well, 5% interest on $100 is 5% interest on $1,000 is 50. 5% interest on $1 million is 50,000. So compound interest, which you can get through retirement and a few other tax advantage vehicles, it really doesn't seem that exciting. But as you go, when you apply the same unit of effort, you start to see more and more results. Really builds steam over time. There is an inverse of that math, which is credit cards. When you're charged compound interest, 0%, 6 months, 18 months. It seems like a good deal. Your minimums are low, but the higher the balance gets, boy, it really starts to feel like quicksand. So somewhere around here is bankruptcy, or, I don't know, probably the end of, or the pause of your venture. And the compounding effect on the upside is equally powerful. So compound interest is exponential. Conversely, simple interest, let's imagine this is a straight line. Is felt sooner, but not as much of a runaway train long term. Okay. Simple interest is where interest is only charged to your principal or earned from your principal. So things like CDs in the bank, basically high yield savings, CDs are earned interest. Simple interest in the debt space would be like mortgage, student loans, and so on. One question I get a lot is, should I pay extra on my debt? And in general, I think if you have debt that's at 6% or less, the answer is most of the time no, because you might want to have cash on hand, because once you pay down debt early, it's not coming back. So you got to be really sure. But what I'm drawing here is, so this is an INT for interest, and this up here is principal. So at the very beginning of a loan payment, this would be true of cars as well, most of your payment will go to interest. And then over time, it'll become more and more principal up here. So it can be very tempting when you're towards the end of a loan to be like, oh, I'm just going to get rid of it. I want to be done. I get that a lot too. Like, I only have 5,000 left on my mortgage, or 50,000, or my car, whatever it is. I just want to get to the finish line. And man, that is satisfying. I'm not denying that. However, it usually, like a financial planning robot wouldn't tell you to do that, because the interest has been charged up front, because the banks, the lenders, they want to make sure they get paid. What if you go bankrupt? What if what if you pass away? So that's their business model. So financial planning has a lot to do with what are your assets? What are your liabilities? What's coming up in your life? And is there more of a tailwind pushing you along investing? Or is there more of a drag on your debt? Okay. I'm going to go back to the slides now. Okay. The third one is insurance. These are common. It's not a comprehensive list, definitely common. Now, health insurance, everybody complains about. So call your senator. I want to call out health insurance specifically because of all the things on this list, it is by far the most expensive and also the most frequently used. And so it sort of exists a little bit apart from everything else on screen, which is more of a classic, like this probably won't happen, but if it does, I'd be screwed. Okay. I'm going to talk about a disability insurance example in just a minute, but all these things, like we don't think of Social Security as insurance, but it actually is old age insurance because when it was founded, people worked until they died. And they thought that 65 was like, hey, if you make it past 65, congratulations. But you don't have a retirement account because that's not a thing. Annuities work similarly. Annuities are like individual pensions. People, insuring people, all of these things, with the exception of, I should say, the first four, it sort of depends. Like you can get access to these if you're an employer or like providing benefits. Like if you're going through a group, you don't need to apply individually. So for example, if get into this more next week, but you might say, oh, I have life, disability, pension, all these benefits through my employer. Well, if you leave that job and become self-employed, you probably won't have them anymore. In which case you'll have to apply individually, and that's not a guaranteed issue. So, I'm a practitioner. I do a lot of these things on the side, life, disability, long-term care, partner sometimes with people on group health insurance. People are declined. So the message in personal finance is something is better than nothing. There's no guarantees. Now on the property side, we'll call out auto insurance specifically because what we're really talking about is liability. So if like I carry errors and omissions insurance because if I'm working for a client and I forget to mention something or say something wrong, they could sue me. So I pay $50 a month for errors and omissions insurance. Healthcare professionals will have malpractice insurance. Business insurance is pretty vague, but that covers lots of different forms of liability. In auto insurance, sometimes, I mean, that's expensive. Sometimes people are trying to go without. The key is not to cover your car. The key is to cover what you would owe if you hit someone else, perhaps seriously. So the liability is more important with auto insurance than even covering your own property. A few things on let's see. Yeah, I don't know if anyone here is health insurance is incredibly complex. There's ICRAs, HSAs, HRAs, level versus pool. Like That's more next week if you have like specific questions as a business owner. But this is an example of a disability claim. Okay. Disability insurance, I would generally recommend to anyone probably mid 40s or younger, or anyone who's reliant upon their income to fund their lifestyle. So in this example, someone is just adding money to an investment account and they don't have disability insurance. Well, if they have a 2-year gap where they can't add to that, the difference between the solid line and the dotted line is over $1 million. Now, these are large numbers, and this is for someone who's, probably older. But think of it this way: if you're making, 40,000 a year, 60,000 a year after taxes, that money is coming in like clockwork to pay your bills. If you're not working, it's not. And to qualify for Social Security, that usually takes 2 years and a number of applications and appeals by design. So Social Security is kind of last resort. This is the sort of thing where with disability insurance, they're insuring your income. Disability forms of credit are going to be much harder to secure after you're self-employed. It's sort of a corporate bias in the personal finance system where they'd be like, oh, this person makes 100 grand, no risk. Well, apparently, if they're, fired or downsized or let go, like there is a risk to them in their career, but in the eyes of like a financial underwriter and then the system at large are like, hey, W-2 income, sure, we'll cover you. We'll loan you money. This is how much you make. Once you get into self-employment, you generally will have to submit like 2 years of tax returns to show that you're making money. Just want to preview this. We'll talk more about this next time. In terms of what business owners and self-employed people actually talk about, ask about, even with me, 90% is like, how do I stay in business, keep this going? Because usually they're really happy and energized doing it, but that's where all their focus is. I got to keep this going. The other 10% is, how can I save some money on taxes? And these are all different ways to do that. Because the underlying message is that if you are doing something that will increase the safety net for yourself, for your family, that will lower the likelihood of depending on the government, or that is moving the economy in a direction that we think is good, like in the bottom right, you got solar, EVs. There are some tax incentives for doing that. If you just want to be a day trader, I don't know. There's no tax. There's no benefit for that. This is remember, this is being recorded, right? And I know I'm going fast, but these are things that in the life cycle of a business, things that we're talking about. Benefits is a big one for employees. So for this week, as we transition into kind of like homework and what comes next, my hope is that you'll understand, the underlying like what these different products are for, and ask good questions. Okay, you can refer back to this. mentioned this in week one. Think of people that have that have expertise, that you trust, that can be on your board. A common thing in business is like a mastermind group or a study group that actually originated in that Think and Grow Rich book, which was recommended reading from week one. Google is only as effective as the question that you ask. So when I think of the problems or the missed opportunities that I see, it's that someone was looking in one area and the answer was over here. So you don't have to work with a financial planner. Truly, just about anything is better than nothing, as long as you don't take your cousin's input as like legal counsel, right? It's like you want to be talking to people like, huh, what's your experience been like? And what, okay. And then you form an opinion from there. This are different sorts of things that you could refer to as goodness of fit when you're working with vendors, coaches, planners, accountants, anyone that you might come across. I came up with this because they're all things that some people found to be very, very, very important, and other people couldn't care less, or vice versa. So, when you're self-employed, as I am, time is money. If someone isn't organized, it's not a hard stop, but it absolutely expands or increases the amount of time that I'll need to get to the same result. So from my perspective, that's something that I'm looking for. And you might be as well. It's like, are they organized? Are they prepared for this meeting? So all of these different things factor in. Now, even in the top left, I've got self-esteem on there. Listening, like bottom right, like some people really want to be listened to. Others want to be told what to do. It's weird, but you kind of like all different ways to look at it. Now, in terms of like trust, there's also two elements of trust. There's the company, and then there's the person that you're working with. Okay. Oftentimes people go directly to a company to get what they want. So, I don't have a workers' comp advisor. I'm looking for something that's convenient and easy to renew. They send me a form, I fill out my payroll. They're like, all right, that's done. For me, it's like $300 a year, and I'm just done with it. If we're talking about an investment strategy, that's more involved. So, good things to ask of an advisor is like, what are your typical clients like? How long have you been doing this? I think is a fair question, just because I'm glad I wasn't asked that very much when I was new. But if they started 6 months ago, you're going to get a different experience. And I think I'm from the Midwest, right? Like, we don't want to be rude, but this is your life. It's a fair question. If you're asking questions and your kind of like gut feeling is like, they're being a little evasive or whatever, trust your gut, because the goal is to be conversational, not fluent. What you already have lots of experience doing is meeting people, building relationships, keeping in touch, reading body language, and this is no different. So don't focus on like, I need to understand this statement. Ask the person to explain it to you. That's how you gauge it. Okay. A few things, kind of homework for next time, because we're transitioning from very broad overview into kind of sequencing action steps for yourself, and then the one-on-one consult. So you can do a household budget. Budgeting is not the key to success, but you do have to be aware of what's happening. So when it comes to all this stuff, step one is awareness. If you don't have a clue what you actually have, which I see, well, it's hard to get the help you need. Number two is intention. What's important to you? What's sort of important to you? What is really not that important to you? And then number three is automation or systems. Being an entrepreneur can be pretty chaotic. Even so, systems are important. So I am going to share a couple things. Actually, I'm going to drag them over here. All right, what's the first one? So first, okay, this is nothing groundbreaking. It's just a spreadsheet. There's a budget. You can make your own. If I'm working with a new client, I generally don't ask them to do something new. I'd much rather see what they already have, because sometimes people will send these extraordinarily complex spreadsheets, and I'm just like, whoa. And that helps me understand where they're at, right? So this is pretty basic examples of debts, assets. So your homework is to just get this on paper, have some idea of where you're at, okay? Now, the more advanced version, and this is maybe if you're getting close to entrepreneurship, or you already have, and to my point on use value versus cost, this is a free download from Clara CFO. And I wish I found it years ago. So I want to give credit where credit is due. If you're looking at this like, wow, this is complicated, she's got a little video. There's Clara. Here's the main idea. What might be on your mind is, how much money do I need to make this work? So there's a tab for your business, and there's a tab for your personal. They are inevitably connected, but they're also different. So what you can do is pick a starting point. This is money in the bank. Estimate how much is coming in and when. An owner's draw, right? And what happens is you'll end up with a balance, a cash balance at the end of the month, which then carries over here. So the headache for a business owner is like, can I afford this $1,000 thing now? The only way to know is to put it in this context, because the hard stop from your loved ones or yourself or the credit or whatever is like, I thought I could do this, but now I'm out of money 5 months later. So of all the things, granted, I'm licensed in investments and certain types of insurance, but this has been enormously helpful for me. So I'll get this out to everyone. And then I'll also share, because I'm trying to do it live, but I have better versions of these that are going to be a little bit more clear. And I can just share those too. Okay.
Perfect, Brett. And I just put in the chat, everybody, I see that we're almost on time. Put in there a bunch of links. I'll be putting up all this content on into that Google Drive folder. And Amy and Juanita, send me an email with your address so that I can get copies of the book off to you. Jen, I'm hoping your book got delivered today, maybe, or that's when they were telling me it was coming. So that's great.
I'll check this
Yeah.
afternoon. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Any closing questions before we actually, and I'll go ahead and I'll stop the recording here so you don't have to have your questions recorded.